Hi everyone. The video we are about to show you was made by our friend Keith Parsons from England. Keith has made two very interesting videos already. The first one was This Life, Next Life, which is right here on our YouTube channel, Spirit Connections. And the second one, this one now is called This Life, Past Life, which is on reincarnation. He's been able, as I said, to put together very good material about this subject. And although the video tackles the issues of past life therapies, we'd like to clarify here that we are not here to pass any judgment on whether these therapies are advisable or not, because some people are afraid these therapies can bring very strong, difficult memories from the past, and some people may not be able to cope with them. But this is not our scope here. Our scope here is to give you some more scientific approach on reincarnation, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
The Second World War may have ended over 7 decades ago, and vehicles remind us of conflict, but the collective memory of war is far more than just military machinery. Every war has its legendary leaders. Back in 1970, 20th Century Fox won Best Picture for its movie entitled Patton. General Patton, you remember, was the American hero who fought and won in the Second World War.
I want you to remember that no bastard ever won war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor dumb bastard die for his country.
France, the Battle of the Bulge.
I will be proud to lead you wonderful guys into battle anytime, anywhere.
Patton.
George C. Scott was the star of the film, and of course it emphasized the courage and leadership qualities of Patton. But here's the controversy. Was he perhaps a bit unhinged? Or did he have true insights that normal people don't usually have? You see, he said he'd had 6 previous military lifetimes. In one of them, he said he was the great commander, Hannibal of Carthage. In another, he said he fought King Cyrus of Persia in ancient Greece. And also, he said he fought alongside Alexander the Great. In Rome, he said he was a legionnaire under Julius Caesar. And in Europe, he said he was a marshal under Napoleon Bonaparte. He also said he fought at the Battle of Crécy, this time as an English knight. So was he perhaps a bit deranged? Well, of course, the film doesn't suggest he was. And I have to confess that I don't know whether people reincarnate in any straightforward way, going from one body or personality or lifetime to another one. But in this documentary, I'm going to study the evidence, because General Patton's past life memories, well, they're not actually all that rare. This is Ray Bryant, who's no longer alive, but back in the 1980s, he was a journalist working here in England on the Reading Evening Post. He decided to write some articles on past lives, and he agreed to be hypnotized by the regression expert Joe Keaton. So he, as well as anybody, should be able to relate what it's like being hypnotized into a previous existence.
It's rather like watching yourself on film. You're in the film and you're watching it at the same time. It's a very strange sort of dreamlike state, only this time you're aware of the dream. You know, you can follow it. You know what's happening all the time.
One life that Ray recalled was particularly important. His life as a soldier in the Crimean War of 1853 to 1856. The trouble was, he couldn't remember his full name. He knew it was Reuben Starr, but he couldn't complete that surname. Fortunately, the Public Record Office at Kew in London yielded a complete list of the men who fought the Crimean War, and among them was one Reuben Stafford. So, under hypnosis, and without telling Ray what they discovered, they asked him the significance of the names of various English towns: Manchester, Sheffield, Nottingham, Stafford. And when he heard the town of Stafford, he was able to confirm that that was his surname in his former life. Now that was a breakthrough, because in the meantime the researchers had discovered the entire military record for Reuben Stafford, including his wounds, his promotion to sergeant, his pay rise, when he was demobilised, and from other sources his cause and date of death. Without prompting, and despite trick questions to put him off the trail, Ray Bryant, under hypnosis, was able to accurately answer questions about the life of Reuben Stafford. This excerpt, which you're about to see, is of Ray Bryant, under hypnosis, reliving the day he was wounded in his former life.
Forward! Forward! Forward!
Off to sleep. Sleep, Reuben. Sleep. Sleep, Reuben. Sleep, Reuben.
After Reuben Stafford left the army, his life went downhill. Following sundry misfortunes, he became depressed, working as a waterman on the River Thames at Millwall in East London. This excerpt is of Ray Bryant, under hypnosis, reliving his death as he drowned off the quayside at Millwall Dock.
Off to sleep. Off to sleep. Off to sleep, Reuben. Off to sleep.
When Ray Bryant returned from hypnosis, the first time that he experienced that death, he was in for a big shock, never knowing that his memories were real, since the researchers had kept from him what they knew about Reuben Stafford. He was amazed to be given his own copy of his death certificate from that former life. His past life recall was factually correct. And here is a copy of the death certificate from the UK's General Register Office. It shows Reuben Stafford died aged 52. He was a waterman, suffered a violent death, suffocation by drowning, and he was found on the 2nd of April 1879 in the waters off Millwall Dock. For many people, this provides ample evidence for reincarnation. And if you want to follow up on Joe Keaton's past life work, two of his books are The Power of the Mind and Encounters with the Past, and both are available on Amazon. This is Cuenca in Spain, the capital of a region also called Cuenca. In the 1970s, a woman we'll call LD allowed some amateur friends to hypnotize her to a past life as Antonia, an innkeeper in Cuenca during the late 1500s. That's the period of the Spanish Inquisition. Once out of trance, LD couldn't forget the experience. It was upsetting her life, dominating her. So she turned to Canadian hypnotherapist Linda Tarazi for help. She decided to take a full past life history of Antonia and to set LD's mind to rest by proving that no such life had ever existed. Only it didn't turn out like that. Linda Tarazi's research took place in America and Spain over 3 years in the 1980s, and she found excellent yet unusual evidence in support of LD's memories. At the Easter ceremonies in Cuenca, even today, It's almost as if the Inquisition never ended. Antonia's story reads like a racy thriller put together from a huge number of memories provided by LD under hypnosis. Antonia was arrested and tortured by the Spanish Inquisition to assure her submission to the Roman Catholic doctrine of the day. Unexpectedly, she fell in love with her inquisitor, and he with her. The startling thing is the sheer quantity of authentic detail provided by LD under hypnosis, and this book really is a page-turner. The author, Linda Tarazi, did a masterful job tracking down the truth, and she involved 9 professors of Spanish history, as well as going to do her own research in Cuenca. Under the Inquisition is nearly 700 pages long, so it's not easy to summarize. But if you want a gripping read that's also evidential, this is for you. And of course it's available on Amazon. Franco De Marco was the chief editor of Hampton Roads when this book was published in 1997. He described Antonia as lusty, bold, almost foolhardy in her courage and rashness. If this was fantasy, he declared, then the author is a genius. He said of Inquisitor Francisco that he was totally sincere in prosecuting, imprisoning, torturing and executing others for the sake of their souls. Thinking he knew God's will, nothing else mattered. So what evidence did Tarazi's research reveal? LD never visited Spain, nor did she have Spanish ancestry, and nor did she speak the language. Yet much of the vital information she gave was only available in old Spanish books or in the municipal and diocesan archives in Cuenca. During her regressions, she gave the names of friends in the town, and much later 8 of these were found hidden in the Inquisition records and in the municipal archives. Now, Antonia disagreed with the authorities on a couple of facts, and it was proven that she was correct. One of them, she said, was the location of the Tribunal of the Inquisition. The government tourist office in Cuenca gave an address which didn't fit with her description. The episcopal records were later found to say that the Inquisition moved to a castle in the town, and that fitted her description perfectly. She also said that Cuenca had a college and that its students used to come into her inn. Now, if you look in the encyclopedias, the history books and the travel books, you won't find any reference to a college in Cuenca. But an American university found an old tome which showed that a college was set up in Cuenca in the mid-16th century. Another point was that Antonia said that there were only 2 inquisitors in Cuenca, when normally the number of those officials was 3. In fact, looking at the records, it was found that there were indeed only 2 inquisitors in the period from 1584 to 1588. And she was correct about that, and she gave their names. Later in her life, towards the end of her life, she sailed to Peru to see her uncle, and she gave information about that country. This was very difficult to verify, but an American university did find in its vaults an old book, and the book had its pages still sewn together. It hadn't yet been cut open, so the information inside the pages could not have been read. but they did verify what Antonia claimed. As Frank DeMarco said when he agreed to publish under the Inquisition, it is hoped that the material in this book will help some to change their lives. This is wild countryside in the state of Virginia on America's east coast. It's near Millborough, a tiny township that was formerly a strategic centre in the American Civil War, a war that lasted from April 1861 to May 1865. In those days, the town had a railway terminal for shipping personnel and war materials. It was described as a pretty town, with a quiet, quaint atmosphere and tall, stately trees. And locals called it Marlborough, despite the spelling being Millborough. This town has an unusual and controversial story attached to it, uncovered by this woman, Dr. Marge Reeder. She published this book, Mission to Millborough, with 2 more books in the series. The story begins in California, on the other side of the United States, in Lake Elsinore, a town south of Los Angeles. It also begins with this, carrot cake. And this woman, Maureen Williamson, who bought carrot cake in a Lake Elsinore coffee shop one day, but couldn't think why she'd done so, since she didn't like carrot cake. Under hypnosis with Dr. Marge Reeder, Maureen remembered a former life in Millborough during the American Civil War, when she was Becky, the wife of John Daniel Ashford, for whom she used to make carrot cake. John Ashford was the town's under-sheriff and a spy for the Unionist North in a town controlled by the Confederates. But that's only the start of the story. Eventually, over 30 residents of Lake Elsinore revealed that they too had experienced the American Civil War in Millborough at the same time as Becky. The result was a complex story of intrigue and espionage, infidelity, rape and murder, the stuff of a very good read. All this was remembered by Lake Elsinore folk under hypnosis as told to Dr. Reeder. They had interlocking stories. Now, group reincarnation might sound pretty far-fetched, and it is very rare, but it's not unique. 2 other books describing group reincarnation are A Tribe Returned by Janet Cunningham and We Are One Another by Dr. Arthur Gurdam. None of the respondents in this case had ever been to Millborough, and yet their memories were detailed. So Dr. Reeder took a couple of them to Virginia to see if this recall could be justified with evidence, and this is what she found. Becky had a memory of living in a house on the edge of town near a stream, and she located the house. In the 1860s, Becky had left a metal cup in the stream for her kids to drink from, and they found the metal cup. Another man, Charlie, remembered having a room in a lodging house, and the lodging house had a swing seat on the balcony. They found the lodging house, and they found the holes in the ceiling which had supported the swing seat. Now, the tunnel on the edge of town was very important in the war, and holes had been made along the wall to blow up the tunnel in case the Unionists took the town, and they located these holes. And they also found the grave of Becky on the edge of town. Now, this is a very strange reincarnation case with apparent evidence, and I think you need to read at least the first of Dr. Reeder's 3 books to satisfy yourself whether or not it's valid. Numerous regression therapists have written books on past lives based on their own clinical experience. From the United States, Dr. Edith Fiore's book is You Have Been Here Before. Dr. Brian Weiss wrote Same Soul, Many Bodies, and several other books too. Dr. Bruce Goldberg published Past Lives, Future Lives. And from Holland, Hans ten Dam wrote Exploring Reincarnation. From the United Kingdom, Andy Tomlinson's books include Exploring the Eternal Soul and Healing the Eternal Soul. Dr. Roger Woolger's contribution is Other Lives, Other Selves. And of course there are other authors too. The reason I mention these authors is to emphasize that past life therapy and finding evidence for reincarnation are not necessarily the same thing. If you have fears and phobias, maybe past life regression therapy will be an effective way of dealing with them quickly. But the point is this: therapists are not concerned with whether your memories are real or not. Their aim is healing and not proving reincarnation. And there's no doubt that some people's past life memories are based on confabulation and fantasy. Unfortunately, some folk claim to be able to detect other people's past lives just by seeing or being with them, without hard evidence. And this can bring scorn on reincarnation itself. One such person claims that Charles Dickens has reincarnated as the Harry Potter author, J.K. Rowling. Another claims that Charles Dickens has reincarnated as Walt Disney, and they can't both be true. Another asserts that J.K. Rowling is the reincarnation of the author C.S. Lewis. Was Danny Kaye the reincarnation of Hans Christian Andersen? Was G.K. Chesterton, the novelist, the reincarnation of Dr. Samuel Johnson? Assertions without evidence are inevitably suspect. And the famous 19th century medium Daniel Douglas Hume declared, "I have met a dozen Marie Antoinettes, 6 or 7 Marys of Scotland, and a whole host of Louis and other kings, about 20 great Alexanders, but never a plain John Smith." Belief in reincarnation is accepted in different cultures right across the globe, but their beliefs frankly contradict each other. Some allege that the transmigration of souls permits humans to reincarnate as animals, and vice versa. Others say that's quite impossible. Some say that when a human being dies, they reincarnate instantly into another life. Others argue that an interlife spiritual dimension, a kind of waiting area, is essential to the process. Clearly, all these interpretations cannot be correct. This documentary is looking at cases where apparent veridical evidence supports the possibility. Without such evidence, maybe reincarnation should be considered simply to be an illusion. This is the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. It's home to the Division of Perceptual Studies set up by Professor Ian Stevenson. If you've watched YouTube documentaries on this subject before the one you're watching now, you will already be familiar with this most famous researcher into children's spontaneous past life memories. He died in 2007, aged 88. But during his lifetime, he dominated this field, writing around 300 papers and 14 books on the subject, and collecting around 3,000 case studies of admittedly varying quality. These were based on interviews with children from Asia to Alaska, and 61% of them recalled lives that ended violently. There's no hypnosis involved here. Children between the age of 2 and 4 simply remember having parents, siblings, wives, children even, from a previous life in a previous location. Often that life ended prematurely and they remember how that happened. But by the age of 7 or 8, those memories are normally fading. Professor Stevenson's major research work was over 2,200 pages long, and it related to the finding that children who remembered a past life where the death was violent often carry birthmarks relating to the death they remember, and these birthmark details can be verified in a coroner's report. The book cover you just saw, where biology and reincarnation intersect, is the short version of his research for the general reader.
We have about 15 cases where there are 2 birthmarks corresponding to bullet wounds of entry and exit. And forensic pathologists know that nearly always if you shoot somebody, the bullet wound of entry is small and round, and the bullet wound of exit is large and irregular in shape. And that's the way our birthmarks, in about half of these cases, they correspond exactly that way.
Since Professor Stevenson is no longer alive, we have to rely on pre-recorded sources to tell his story. Many of his most impressive cases are now really rather old, but that doesn't make them less valid. This programme you're watching was made in 2016. 24 years previously, in 1992, BBC Wales made an excellent television documentary about Stevenson's work. Entitled In Search of the Dead, Remembered Lives, it's available still on YouTube, and I'd say it's a must-see programme for anyone interested in this topic. I'm going to take an excerpt from this film, which was written by Geoffrey Iverson and narrated by Philip Tibbenham, to show the solid evidence of the programme. It demonstrates the thorough research methods of Stevenson and his colleagues. The extract I'm going to show is just over 6 minutes long, and it shows two cases, one from India and the other from Sri Lanka.
In a village in northern India in the 1970s, a small boy lost the fingers of his right hand in a fodder chopping machine. Later, the child died, but in a neighbouring village, a boy was born who claimed memories of the dead child's life. There was other evidence too. Lekpal's case was investigated by Dr. Stevenson and the Indian parapsychologist Dr. Satvant Pasricha.
अच्छा लेखपाल, पहले जन्म की बातें याद है तुम्हें?
यहाँ पैदा हुई, थोड़े कुछ बाद जब छोटे छोटे थे तब थोड़ा याद करो करते थे, फिर इलाज चलते रहो। जैसे पिताजी ने मोह को ऐसे शराब गांजा पियो करते थे, उनने ऐसी मशीन फिराई दी, तो हाथ वो कटियो, हम तो वहीं खड़े रह गए, उंगलियां पांचों उनके सामने गिरी जान, तब एकदम बड़बड़ाने भी सब कि लला हाथ कटियो तब
तब तुम्हारा नाम क्या था?
हुक्म सिंह।
इस पे नाम लिखना जरा फिर से एक बार. Being born with missing fingers is very rare, and the corresponding feature in the previous personality adds to its importance. The same fingers were chopped off. Also, there was no family history of missing fingers, and there was no such case in the whole of village.
Dr. Pasricha says a weakness of the case is that the two villages are only 5 miles apart. Details of the dead child's accident could have been known in both places. Dr. Pasricha went with Lekpal to the house of the dead boy. Inside were the child's mother and older brother. The boy was recognized and accepted by both. Lekpal lives here for much of the year.
तो आपको लगता है कि आपका बेटा ही है ये?
हमारा बेटा है, आइए। हम तो उन्हें बेटे की तरह से भी हमें नाटाई की तरह से मानते।
ये आपका भाई लगता है?
हमारा भाई है।
भाई है आपका? नहीं, भाई तो इस जन्म में तो नहीं आपका ये भाई?
इस जन्म नहीं, पिछले जन्म में तो था भाई।
अच्छा, तो अभी भी आप इसको भाई मानते हैं?
भाई है ही।
अच्छा, कैसे यकीन हो गया कि आपका भाई है?
जब मैं वहाँ गया था पहली बार इनके यहाँ, वहाँ एक शादी मैंने कराई थी, तो वहाँ मैं पहली बार गया, तो जब मेरे पास आया, मैं 3-4 भाई है, सभी जने बैठे थे वहाँ, तो इसने पहचान लिया, बोला ये मेरा भाई है, ये हमारे भाई है, एक हमारी बहन थी, हम करीब 50 आदमी घर में, एक ही बहन है मेरे पास। अच्छा, तो भी हमारी माता जी भी है।
तो आपको लगता है कि आपका बेटा ही है ये?
The mother of the dead boy is certain Lekpal is her son, and not simply because of the evidence of his damaged hand. In a tropical downpour in Sri Lanka, a father escorts his daughters home from school. 10-year-old Subhashini has a fear of storms. During another downpour when she was 3, the terrified child told her parents about a landslip on a mountainside during a thunderstorm. It was on a tea plantation where, she said, she had a different father and mother. Subashini no longer has these memories, only a fear of storms. Her mother remembers what she said.
Amma idat hariyata wassane මේ වගේ වැස්සා වහිනකොට මේ කන්දක් ආවනේ එක පාට අපේ ගෙදරට ගුඩු ගුඩු ගාලා සද්දය ආවා. ඒ එනකොටම අම්මා කෑ ගැහුවා මේ මොකද්ද ඉන්නේ සද්දයක් එනවා අර කන්දවත් වෙනවද කියලා බලන්න කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ මෙයා තාත්තයි මෙයා දෙන්න ටෝච් එකක් අරන් එළියට ආවා. එළියට එනකොටම අපි ඔක්කොම හිර වුණා. ඊට පස්සේ මම මොකද කරේ කියලා ඇහුවා. එදර කියලා මං ඊට පස්සේ දුවගෙන ටෝච් එකක් අරන් කුලියපේට ආවා.
When Subashini was 3, she demonstrated to her parents how tea was picked. She described the bushes in detail, although none grow where she lives. She said the tea pickers were Tamils, except for her own family of Sinhalese Buddhists. They lived in lines, which her middle-class parents didn't understand. But lines are the tea workers' name for their terrace shacks. They lived in Gampola, 60 miles away. Stevenson's researchers found there had indeed been a disaster on a tea plantation at Gampola 2 years before Subashini was born.
There was lightning and thunder, and at about that 8 p.m. the rocks above this came down with mud and water, and it slipped down here, covering all these line rooms, half the line rooms, and it went down below about 200 to 250 yards below. I think about 28 people died on that, but unfortunately we were able to recover only about 13 bodies.
Documents from the disaster inquiry confirm that the victims were Tamils, except for one family of Sinhalese Buddhists. They had a 7-year-old daughter, Devi Malika, who seemed to match Subashini's statements. What happened to that family?
There were 5 living at that time in that house, all were killed. These 2 who survived were outside on that special day.
Devi Malika has a surviving brother and sister. Subashini's first visit here was abandoned when the child became hysterical with fear. Later, she met these 2, and they believe she is their sister reborn. Devi Malika's body was never recovered. Some of Subashini's details of life on this tea plantation were unverifiable. But the researchers say 25 of her 32 statements match the life of Devi Malika.
I think where the evidence has led us is that whereas formerly a belief in reincarnation depended on religious traditions, scriptures for certain countries, oral traditions for others, now at least one can point to evidence. And the evidence is not flawless. Every case has some weakness or other. But there is an accumulation of quite strong evidence from, I would say, 100 cases. Even for those 100 cases, there are alternative possibilities of interpretation, but reincarnation is certainly a plausible. I would say in some cases it's, for me, the most compelling interpretation, even though it's not the only one.
Those remarks were made by Professor Stevenson back in 1992, and since then other researchers have accumulated more evidence, both under hypnosis and through the spontaneous past life memories of children. By the way, the significant researchers in this area include Carol Bowman, Professor Erlander Haraldson, Professor Antonia Mills, Dr. Saswant Pastrika, and Dr. Jim Tucker. I've not intentionally ignored their work, and I do acknowledge its value. One recent example where Carol Bowman was involved was the case of James Leninger, a youngster with a Second World War memory as a pilot on the American aircraft carrier, the Natoma Bay. He said his former name was Lieutenant James Houston Jr., and he died aged 21 during the Battle of Iwo Jima. He was shot down in the Pacific on his 50th mission, the last before he was due to return home. He even remembered the names of his buddies on the ship. When Professor Stevenson was still alive, the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases dedicated a whole edition to his work. They described him as a methodical researcher. They also said of reincarnation, either he's making a colossal mistake, or he'll be known as the Galileo of the 20th century. Wikipedia, on the other hand, seems to have gone out of its way to denigrate Stevenson's efforts, just as they seem to be consistently negative about virtually all psychic phenomena. The Hoover Institution at Stanford University has said, Wikipedia is an unreliable resource for correct knowledge, information, and facts about a subject, because as an open source website, the editorial content or the articles are readily subjected to manipulation and propaganda. So now it's decision time. Reincarnation or no reincarnation? I'll admit that I can't understand why the cases I've described in this program should even exist if there's no possibility of reincarnation. But I think we have to have the humility to admit that we don't know how the process works, nor what its purpose is if it has one. To make such assertions, I think, would be mere speculation. But that hasn't prevented huge numbers of famous and religious folk from making inspired comments about it.